Okay, hi, is this working all right? Awesome, thanks so much for coming to our presentation. I'm Ellen, and that Eli is going to be giving a part of the presentation, but we are from the USU Water Quality Extension and manage the program called Utah Water Watch. And just to get an idea, how many of you are familiar with Utah Water Watch? A good number of you. I'm not going to go too deep into the program, so we can get into some of the more specifics that we're working on. But if you have any questions, you can talk more about the program with us afterwards. Just a quick overview of the program. It's the Utah's Citizen Water Quality Monitoring Network, and so we engage citizens with water quality around the state. And so the volunteers are, as I mentioned, around the state, and they monitor on streams and lakes. On this map on the right, you'll see a bunch of stars, and so that's indicating our monitoring locations, primarily for the red are the stream sites and the blue are the lake sites. And the program has several purposes. One is to educate and encourage stewardship and provide that connection to the watershed. Additionally is to provide assistance for monitoring needs around the state. And so that kind of, we've got the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 program, and so the Tier 1's on the more educational side, and then the Tier 2 is up to state water quality standards that are used more so for assessment. And then this picture on the bottom is just showing one of the high school teachers in the Salt Lake area out monitoring in January with her students. So Eli and I kind of came in this past December, and Brian Green was the program coordinator previously who got this whole program rolling and did a great job to get the initial start. But Eli and I didn't really know who the volunteers were. So that was in February, we tried contacting them all and really getting a sense for how things were and getting to know them. And so we asked them, what do they enjoy about volunteering? How can we make the program better? And then their answer was, they loved what they were doing, they enjoyed getting out, but they were concerned about whether their data was being used and wanted something new. And so just about the volunteers, they come from all walks of life. We work with students, teachers, citizens, just concerned citizens, retired professionals, just a wide range of people. And so it brings together people with many different goals. And so because they have all these different goals, it's important to keep them all engaged and find out what they would like to be participating with. And just real quick, the middle two pictures are from a couple of our Tier 2 trainings this summer. The picture up on the left was one at Tier 1 training at Thanksgiving Point, and Dave Francis, who's with USU Extension, he plans on using that with his 4-H group, on the educator side, and then also just interested citizens that want to participate. And the bottom corner has a poster where one of the classes was out monitoring Salem Pond, and so they just did a poster talking about what they learned from their water quality. And then this summer we had our first annual barbecue with invite all the volunteers and the different watershed coordinators to kind of just get them together to talk, have a conversation, and learn who each other were, what they were doing. And Eli was instrumental in getting this all going. He really wanted to have that barbecue and get that connection. And Carrie Lundeen, one of the environmental scientists up at the district, was there, and they really just enjoyed learning about some of those specific projects that were going on. So we want to provide a variety of opportunities. As I mentioned, Tier 1 is more on the educational side. The data is definitely used in classrooms along with our streamside science water quality curricula that we've developed. They can use that data that it collected to do further studies and understanding of the watershed. It's also a great family activity. A number of people go out with their kids or with their grandkids to really just as a fun activity. And then it also collects baseline data. So if these areas where somebody's not able to get out too frequently, at least we've got a volunteer who's out noticing if there's any issues, and they can certainly help provide that data. Then we've got our Tier 2 participation, which is that higher level state standard procedures that they follow. And that provides more direct connection a lot of the time to specific projects, collect data used for assessment, and then also they, at our Tier 2 trainings, we bring in the watershed coordinators and get them to really learn about some of those projects. And we're going to go a little more into some of these, just a quick overview. So we've got a lot of water quality needs around the state. Our resources, are certainly thinner in some areas. Most of our population is around the Wasatch Front, so there's a lot of different partners working in this area, but especially down in southern Utah and some of those more rural areas, volunteers can be really key in helping to provide some data. Some of the needs are watershed project assessment, so just we go in and do all these projects, but it's really important to see how those, if they're actually improving water quality, and so I'll talk a little bit more about how we implement that project assessment. Also, just collecting data in rural areas. A lot with the E. coli and harmful algae is a big push to do some studies on that and get a better handle on the state. And so we're doing a lot with that Eli will touch on. And then outreach and education. Certainly, the non-point source program is a voluntary program, so it's really important just to get that education out there, to encourage stewardship and promote, good practices. And then we've just got a huge list of partners that we work with. This is certainly not a final list. There's so many more. I tried to focus a little more on the Salt Lake area, some of the partners, that have these projects that need data that we can work with and connect those volunteers to. And so I'm going to pass it to Eli, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of those specific projects that we are working on.
Sure. So we came in and asked, how can we connect those volunteers with the statewide monitoring needs? So one of the things that we found out from talking to the volunteers was that some of them had been doing it for quite a while, and they wanted to be involved in Tier 2 training, and they wanted to know really what the needs were in the community. They learned a little bit about water quality overall, but they weren't connected with local groups. So we held some Tier 2 trainings this summer, and we also reached out to local watershed committees to determine the potential projects and local needs in different areas, because watersheds, water pollution is highly localized. In one area, problems might be due to urban stormwater runoff, or another area it might be mine drainage. So it's nice to have the volunteers connected with local projects instead of just monitoring the same issues everywhere. So again, we connected the volunteers with local groups, and then we're working with those partners to find resources, because some of these Tier 2 things that they're monitoring might require better equipment or more expensive testing or whatnot. So here's our training in Park City, where we improve the Tier 2 monitoring. They use the Utah Standard Operating Procedures to collect data, so that's the same methods that water quality scientists that work for the state use, so that that data would be comparable. And the idea behind that is that data collected from one person in one site should be the same as data collected from another person at the site at the same time. So removing some of the variability. And we teach them how to use multi-probes, how to use chemistry, or to take chemistry samples, how to collect E. coli samples, how to take photo points. Here they're collecting macroinvertebrates, they're doing stream flow, and I'm also working on teaching them how to identify harmful algal blooms, which, as you guys probably know, is an increasing issue in the state. So we want to determine the projects and the needs. So like I said, it's a local issue, and so we want to work with watershed committees, of which there are many around the state, watershed coordinators, which the division has in most major watersheds, extension agents, and local nonprofits here in the Salt Lake Valley. There are quite a few local nonprofits that Ellen's been working on building partnerships with. And the projects that we're working on, that we've kind of found where the need is with lakes monitoring. There has been, I'll talk a little bit more about it, but in terms of E. coli. Many rural lakes were not being monitored, and E. coli, there's a certain standard for number of colonies for swimming in these lakes. So we can find volunteers that might work with extension agents to monitor these lakes to make sure that they are meeting those standards. And harmful algal blooms also, that's been an issue as things get warmer and there are more nutrients. Those blooms keep occurring, but the state doesn't necessarily have a big infrastructure for going out and detecting those blooms. Um, we're also working in East Canyon Creek, which I've got a slide to talk about, and then Alan's going to be talking about work in Salt Lake County. So we're going to be creating those local volunteer groups. And so these steps are kind of already what I went over. It's important to note that we develop a sample and analysis plan, which says, okay, these are the number of times that you need to go out and monitor. These are the things you're monitoring for. This is where the data is going to go. This is how you're going to monitor, so that volunteers know what they're getting into before they start. And we also are emphasizing sharing the data. We've got our own database, but we're also flexible in terms of where the volunteers can share their data, because we want to remove barriers and having data that we collect actually be used. So the East Canyon Creek Club that I'm working on, we had a lot of volunteers in Park City. There are a lot of highly educated folks up there. It has a tradition of mining, and it led to some really unique water quality issues. But now the rapid development that occurred around the Olympics has led to sedimentation and issues with stormwater in East Canyon Creek, which used to host runs of kokanee salmon, but those are gone, and the native Bonneville cutthroat trouts have declined in population. I hosted a meeting with different officials from Summit County, Park City, and the Snyderville Basin Water Reclamation District, talking about stormwater, because the TMDL did identify stormwater as a major issue in Park City now that there's so much developed land up there. And out of that, we had some really good discussions with Summit County. And so volunteers are going to be going out and monitoring the discharge. You'll see if you go to a development that the stormwater runoff is going to go into retention ponds. And right now, there isn't any monitoring to see if the pollutants are actually being taken out by those detention ponds or not. So we're going to be hoping to monitor those a little bit in cooperation with the county. And so we've got those local residents, and we're getting them engaged with efforts in the watershed, connecting them to the East Canyon Committee watershed group. And then next summer, I'm hoping to have them also monitor for dissolved oxygen and temperature, which are two issues up there, which have to do with there not being quite as much water in the stream, and also a lot of plants growing. Maybe the riparian health isn't as good. And this is the lakes program that I'm working on. So you can see we've got a number of sites. That's what that brochure I handed out is. These sites in green are places that I've identified as being at risk for harmful algal blooms. So we're going to have at least a tier 1 volunteer out there, and they're going to be trained to differentiate between normal green algae growth and potentially dangerous cyanobacteria, and collect a sample. And okay, and then we've also got these. And if they do think that it's cyanobacteria, we've got more advanced volunteers that will go out and look under microscopes that we're locating around the state to determine if the algae is in fact cyanobacteria, and then contact the Division of Water Quality. And then, like I said before, they're also looking at E. coli, which is these yellow sites, and they're also looking at community fishing locations, which are the blue sites. And so that's helping the Division of Water Resources, the Wildlife Resources, better manage those community ponds, so volunteers will report which fish they catch. This is E. coli monitoring. Like I said, many rural areas are not being monitored, and we're training volunteers up in this more advanced IDEX method. And then this is the harmful algal bloom monitoring. Like I said, warmer waters and more people lead to more blooms that we've been seeing, like in Utah Lake and the Jordan River. And this is how our harmful algal bloom program works. So if one of our regular volunteers observes a bloom occurring here, they're going to fill that out in the data sheet and take a sample to a tier 2 volunteer and extension agent, which can then use a microscope. And we've been doing that this summer. It's been really neat to learn what the different types of algae look like. This is Anabina. And then they're going to contact the health department, the Division of Water Quality, and they're going to take it from there and do toxin testing to determine if that harmful algae is actually producing toxins and might be a risk to human health. And Alan's going to talk a little bit about some of the projects here in the Salt Lake.
Cool. So Eli's been really great in getting some of the projects up in Park City going. We're still at the starting point, but we're working with people in the Salt Lake area, certainly on the Jordan River, to try and develop some projects. As I mentioned earlier, project assessment monitoring is really important. So we do this project that's supposed to, help support the banks or reduce nutrient input, or there's a wide range of tools that we use to help improve the water quality. And so it's really important to get out and do some monitoring and testing before the project goes in, during the project, and then after the project, just so you can actually get that sense of whether that actually that project actually implemented some improvements. So for an example, we have the Cottonwood Pond, which is a stormwater detention pond, and is actually just about a block from here. But they've gone in and done a lot of restoration. I'm not super familiar with the project, but they've put in some plants around the banks. So the goal is to improve habitat and native vegetation, contain some of those nutrients, and mitigate flooding, slow water entering the Jordan River, and then also a big thing with the Jordan River is involving the community and encouraging ownership and stewardship of that land. And so some ways that we're thinking of connecting volunteers is through some different vegetation assessments, see if those plants are continuing to keep hold, doing some inlet-outlet chemistry, see what the water quality is before, as it enters the pond, and then when it comes out. Certainly photo points are really important, just a visual assessment of projects, and then also it's just good to have some E. coli and algae data as well. And so we can do this on multiple levels, get schools and different community members involved in the tier 1, or also do some higher level tier 2 assessment that they can actually use for reports to show how the project has done. Just additional projects, the Weber River is ramping up to do a big project, and they want to get a lot more community involvement, similar to what they've done on the Jordan River, just to get that ownership and connection to the river. There's some E. coli monitoring down in the Virgin River, so I've this year been making a point to connect with all the different schools, universities, colleges around the state, because they've got a lot of both community involvement and then the students who can go out and provide some resources and do some projects there. And so this is just another list of people that we work with, and certainly not conclusive. There's just so many more. We're really trying to connect with everybody. Any questions? I'm based out of Salt Lake, and Eli's up in Logan, so we can try and get that wider stretch around the state. A few websites. We've got our Utah Water Watch website, which has more programmatic information. Our water quality website, which is any sort of water quality outreach throughout the state. And then also there's a utahcleanwater.org, which is, we manage it, but it's for all the partners in the state to provide resources and information so that we can all get better connected. And we've got these projects that we're working on. We're growing. We're trying to connect in new areas. So we are excited to work with any of you. And if you have any ideas or ways that you think that volunteers could be better connected, we certainly welcome any of those. So how are we on time? 5 minutes. Okay. So now we are happy to take any questions that you have. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're still, it's only been around 5 years, and so we've got a good set of regular monitors. Most of it has been focused on that tier 1 level, and we certainly are trying to get more, I mean, as you saw on the map previously, most of that's in that Wasatch area. So we're definitely working. I've been working with Dixie College and SUU and other groups, certainly with our different extension agents to get some of that wider stretch. We do have some. We haven't done a whole lot with the Tier 2. We've had some E. coli. Volunteers have been helping collect some E. coli and helping watershed coordinators with various projects. But that's something we're just really trying to grow at this point. And does that answer your question?
Yeah. So in general, the volunteers, we've been referring to Tier 1, but really they're using pretty basic, more like education level tools. So that data is not necessarily intercolatable with state data. So that's what we're trying to work on, is matching the data collection to local needs and making sure that data is used.
Yeah. Sure. Most of our Tier 1, we ask them to do April through October once a month. They're at varying degrees. Some of them are really consistent. Some of them are not so consistent. We also, involve a lot of teachers with this program. And so, they're out with their students. So oftentimes they're out more during the school year than through the summer. It really varies on, and then we've got different projects. So maybe some stormwater issues will be different scheduled.
Yeah, they would be going out during the storm specifically. One thing I forgot to mention is with the harmful algal bloom monitoring, I was kind of rushing through that, but one of our partners is NOAA. And so we've got 2 volunteers out there right now, but we're going to be increasing that, who go every 2 weeks to a site and collect a water sample, bring that water sample to a scope, and then analyze what species are there and their density. And NOAA is going to be then pairing that data with satellite imagery to see if they can predict harmful algal blooms. So that's a nice example of a community science project. Yeah.
Yeah, we're really just trying to connect it with the needs. So certainly our Tier 1 trying to capture some of that spring runoff, or it really just depends partner or project specific needs. All right. Well, we'll be around today and tomorrow, and there's a few handouts on the USU Extension table as well. But we're happy to answer any questions you guys have. So, thanks.